Good morning. So I just wanted to jump on and offer my thoughts on some of the questions that were popped in the group yesterday. Every now and again, I like to just pop a post in and give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you have on your mind about your weight, about your food relationship, or anything kind of in that arena. And we had some great questions asked yesterday. And I want to start off by giving my thoughts on Chloe's question. It was a really, really interesting question. And Chloe asked, how do we go about dealing with going out for dinners or meals over the Christmas period, and how many of the menus nowadays have the calorie content of the food alongside when you're ordering. And it's a really interesting thing that's been introduced by the government over the last few years. This is something that's becoming more and more increasingly on not just restaurant menus, but also on our packaging of food. So what I'm going to talk about today, Chloe, I'm not going to get into like the nuts and bolts of the recovery side of disordered eating and eating disorders, and from that perspective, but I do sort of want to just talk a little bit about the introduction of calories onto menus and packaging and stuff like that, and how that's been received into the general community. Because quite often what happens, and diets are a little bit like this, diets generally, anything that's kind of a solution to our weight tends to very much come from the physical aspect of raising awareness. So I kind of get where the government were going with increasing our awareness of just how much fat is in food or calories are in food. And it kind of makes sense when you look at it from a logical perspective. If we have more awareness of if we go out for a meal and we normally order something that's got like 1,000 calories in, if we didn't know that it had 1,000 calories in, maybe we would make a better choice. So from a logical perspective, I kind of get that. But what it doesn't take into consideration, and when these labelling ideas were first being thought about, there's a charity called Beats which works with eating disorders and disordered eating, and they were kind of really anti these ideas because it really discounted people who had a challenging relationship with their food, and for anyone who's got an eating disorder, so anorexia, bulimia, compulsive eating, or a disordered eating. So for most of us, we kind of fit somewhere on that scale, whether we've got a healthy relationship with food, or whether we're more on the anorexic and bulimic side, or whether we're more in the compulsive eating. Some of us fit on that rating scale at some point. So the introduction of these calories onto menus, from the government have got to be seen to be doing something about the obesity epidemic that's out there. And they've looked at it very much from the physical perspective, which of course, if you're somebody who lives in fear around food, and this is just another opportunity to invite fear, this whole kind of many people when they're going out for meals, a time that should be quite exciting, it actually generates quite a lot of fear for them. So, in answer to your question, Chloe, I'd kind of steer you down the Beats charity website, because they do talk quite a lot about this, and they've got some really good tips and ideas on how to deal with and work with challenging situations that you've got coming up. So like I said, I'm not going to look at this from like the psychology and how to heal and stuff like that, because that's massive in itself. But in terms of ideas, things like, and I know you already do this, Chloe, if you are going out for a meal, maybe already, have a look at their menus and order ahead of time. So by the time you get to the restaurant, you haven't then got to put yourself in that place where you're opening that menu up. You've already done it ahead of time. So it takes away that pressure and that stress. Another idea would be to get friends ordering for you, so you don't even look at that menu. They can go through the menu for you, and you can choose without having to actually look at the menu and those numbers trigger you. And another idea, from what my understanding is, I've done a little bit of reading around this, restaurants have to stock menus that don't have the calories on them. So you could ask for a menu that doesn't include the calorie count. Now, me personally, I'd probably find that quite uncomfortable to do that. It's a bit like if you're on an aeroplane and you have to ask for the extender belt. It's kind of quite exposing, isn't it? So whether there would be an opportunity to ring ahead to the restaurant and ask for non-calorie quoted menus to be on the table for everybody, so it doesn't single you out. So I love the idea that you're actually asking the question, because what that means is you are trying to prepare ahead of time for these events. So you've clearly had experiences where seeing those calories on the menu send you into a bit of a spiral. So actually starting to think ahead of how you can go out and make these eating events as pleasurable as you can when you have a disordered relationship with food, and recognising that those calories on the menu tend to send you off in a bit of a spiral is really helpful. Unfortunately, we can't change these things that are happening, and it is very sad that the government look at solutions for obesity very much from almost, it's like a shaming perspective, isn't it? You know, you shame somebody into not choosing the thing that's got over 1,000 calories in it, but I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of that. But there are some like quick wins that you could start to think about and start putting into place between now and those eating events. So one, go onto their website and choose ahead of time. So okay, you are still going to have that trigger of the calories as you're doing it, but you do it in a safer environment where you're not around people and you don't feel a pressure to then have to order there and then. The other one is to get, if you're out with people who kind of know a little bit about your history, get them to read the menu out for you so you can choose. And the other one is to actually ask for menus that don't have the calorie count on them. From the reading that I've done, that has to be something that restaurants offer. So hopefully, those give you some sort of short-term solutions that you can start to put in between over this Christmas period, and then maybe in the new year, starting to just look at that whole process for you in terms of that moment you see that number by the side of the food on that menu. What is that chain of events that follows? How does that make you feel? What thoughts does that start to trigger for you? And how does that tie into some of your beliefs about food and those food rules that you have? But that's a much, much bigger arena to start working on. So hopefully that's helpful. I do totally understand it. A lot of people just avoid going out, don't they? So it's great that you don't avoid those sorts of situations, because it's important. Those eating events aren't just about the food. They are about connecting with people. And a big shift I've made over the years is making it more about the social event than it actually being about the food. And quite often I'll go out and I will just order a starter, and I'm comfortable with that now. Or I'll order a cheese board and I'll graze on that whilst others are having their starters and their main. But I wouldn't have been comfortable with that 3 or 4 years ago, but I am comfortable with really listening to what I need and not just eating all 3 courses just because it's the social event. So it's really important that you know that you've got choices, and if you choose to only go and eat a starter, that's absolutely fine, isn't it? Maybe tell people ahead of time. But part of healing our food relationship is learning to actually do what suits us and not fit in with everybody else. So hopefully that's been helpful.